What I have for you today is a interesting Spanish case about loss-making LRDs. Now, this was supposed to be part of a discussion on whether LRDs can make losses during financial crises or COVID. And let's see what the court said here. It doesn't quite give us an answer, but it does raise some side issues. So I have a suitcase from 1998 bought in New York, which is a DELSEY, and it still lasts perfectly. I'm quite impressed with DELSEY. The Spanish courts were maybe less so. So let's see what was going on here. As you can see here, DELSEY is a US group. It had a super distributor in France, and that super distributor sold suitcases to DELSEY Spain, to Greece, and to Portugal. And in Greece and Portugal, you had third-party distributors. And in DELSEY Spain, then sold its suitcases to third-party distributors in Spain, like supermarkets and large distributors. What is not discussed in this case, which I find a bit of a pity, is they do not deal with the comparability between the Greek, the Portuguese, and the Spanish markets. It would have been interesting if the court spent a little more time on that. But let's see what the case is actually, what the court actually said. A 10-second commercial. If you want to learn more about international taxation or transfer pricing, or treat yourself to an all-round update, or if you want your team to learn or stay updated, please visit my online courses. So if we look at the facts as described by the court, it says DELSEY ESPAña distributes and sells suitcases and other travel accessories of DELSEY in the Spanish market. The DELSEY Group manufactures most of its products in Asia for distribution in Europe and centralized through the French subsidiary DELSEY France, who owns central warehouses, etc. And then it says DELSEY Spain operates as a local distributor without inventory, and all its product sourcing comes from the related entity DELSEY France. But now if you look at the results of Spain in 2005, minus 600,000, and then it just goes down and down, and it is 400, 300, 300. And then in 2010, 400,000, and 2011, 400,000. But then it starts making profits in 2012 through 2014. So it made losses already pre the financial crisis. And if we see what the court says about this, the court says, asked about its transfer pricing policy, the taxpayer explained that for the valuation of purchases made from the related entity DELSEY France, it followed the CUP. This was because DELSEY France was supplied on the Portuguese and Greek markets by distributors, by independent of distributors, namely Malas and Berson. And given that the products sold were identical and that those functions were local distributors also coincided with DELSEY Spain, it was considered that there was an appropriate external comparable. This makes sense, right? But then the court also says that as of 2011, the party identifies the method used as the resale price method. And they mean that in terms of it's not TNMM, it is based on gross profits. But now the court comes with some issues. It says, first of all, repeated losses. Over a very long period of time, the institution has invariably declared losses. Let us recall that between 2005 and 2008, the Spanish economy came from a very long cycle of growth that began in 1993, reaching growth rates of over 4% in GDP in 2006. In contrast, between 2009 and 2013, the Spanish GDP decreased significantly, and from 2014 onwards, it grew moderately. It should also be recalled that in the Spanish case, domestic consumption is the main component of GDP. Well, the taxpayer recurrently declared negative operating results and negative profitability with figures that reached double digits, 18% on losses in 2005, 13 in 6 and 7. This surprising situation has never been explained by the claimant. This notorious, prolonged, and apparent disconnection with the economic environment suggests that the transfer pricing policy and not the economic context is the final cause of the business losses. So what they say here is your results were not in sync with the Spanish economy at all, and that would include the financial crisis period, right? Which, if borne by an independent party, these losses would have led to the closure of or abandonment of the business, or at least selling someone else's suitcases or something else than suitcases altogether. In the present case, the complainant insists that the business profile is low risk as it has no inventory, it only makes purchases when it has secured sales, it has little risk of insolvencies due to the customer profiles, and the risk of returns is shared with DELSEY France. Okay, but then it still says this low profile of low risk trader in no way corresponds to the evolution of the profitability declared over the period of 2005 through 14. This profitability was on average minus 10% for 2005 to 12, and 13 and 14 only reached a modest 2% of profitability. And the court delves into this. This is like you've got no relationship with the local economic market, and primarily it is locals buying suitcases. It's said already before as well, right? And then it said not all products sold in Spain were also sold in Greece or Portugal, which means that in 2009, 23% of DELSEY Spain's purchases were not included in this analysis because there were no sales for similar products in Greece and Portugal, which is a little bit difficult to then say that you're using the CUP method only. And when it comes to the pricing, they talked with a financial officer of DELSEY Spain, and the court then says the operation generates a purchase invoice with a price. Mr. Rubin does not know how this price is generated. He is not involved in its determination, nor is there a contract in which it is established how the purchase price is determined from the French supplier. He does not know the price, how that price is determined, nor does he know in advance what the price will be. And then ask yourself, if you are an unrelated party, whether you would buy products on this basis. We're not going to tell you what the price is up front. We will tell you it's the same as that of the Greeks and the Portuguese. Good luck, right? This is not really dealing at arm's length. And there's another issue, because the Greek and the Portuguese prices were not the same. It is clear from the price list sent to Portugal and Greece that the group is clearly pursuing a policy of price discrimination according to markets, since the prices of the same products are different in Portugal and Spain. And then it goes on to show that, for instance, some products that were sold to the one party were priced at 55, 62 and 71 euros, while the same products were sold at 75, 82 and 93 euros to the other party. So there's almost a 25% difference between these prices between Portugal and Greece. And the court goes on to discuss this and says, you gave us a list. 205 references were taken from products supplied to the three suppliers. It was a table of 4 columns, so you had the product on the left and you had the 3 countries to the right of it. But there was no comparability adjustment or anything, and the prices refer to unit prices, right? So the 2009 and 10 reports, the only ones provided for this period, simply conclude with the following. From the above analysis, and the court already says sick, we can see that the prices paid by DELSEY Spain are in line with the prices paid by independent parties, except there's a 25% difference between some of them, right? And 25% of them are missing. It can therefore be concluded that the prices paid by DELSEY Spain are at market value. And the court totally trashes the statement, because it says, as a contested agreement rightly points out, it is surprising that there is talk of a prior analysis when no analysis has been carried out. What is clear is that the proclaimed alignment of prices is in no way observed. Quite the contrary. In fact, what this information shows is that the group has a policy of price discrimination between markets, right? And this is just, well, it's killing for a transfer pricing case in court to claim that this is based on cups. And the problems go on, because the court also says it should be noted that it is not known how the data in the column on unit prices for DELSEY Spain have been obtained. But what we do know is that the prices given for Portugal and Greece are the unit prices in the catalogue and the price list provided. They are not therefore average prices, and therefore also incorporate, right? Well, sorry, the average prices would then would be including discounts and rebates and returns, right? And we don't know for Spain and Portugal and Greece whether all 3 lists did include rebates, discounts and returns, or whether none of them did, right? And the price list for Portugal and Spain, Portugal and Greece, I believe, also were not averages throughout the year. They were picked at random dates. So the court does not like this, and this is the lower court. The lower court made all these arguments, and the higher court basically copied the whole decision of the lower court, saying we like what they've done. So the lower court goes on to say, despite the fact that after 2010, Malas and Berson continued to act as independent distributors for DELSEY France, it turns out that unexpectedly they are no longer used as comparables for the purposes of estimating the market price. The sharp turn in the company's policy that has not been clarified at all beyond this cryptic annotation from 2011 saying it is worth mentioning that in 2011, due to internal and economic reasons, and a modification of pricing policy was carried out by the group in order to adapt its needs to the economic environment. And this is a kind of sentence that you often would see in TP documentation, right? It's a lot of interesting words, which makes an interesting sentence when put together, but if you take it apart, it says nothing, because they don't say what the internal or the economic reasons are. They don't describe what the modification was exactly, except going from cup to resale price and then cutting out these two companies, maybe because their resale price margins were outside of the range, one would assume on the upper side, otherwise they wouldn't have continued to be distributors. And it also doesn't talk about what the needs of the economic environment is, other than that they needed to start making profits, right? So the court is not very patient with this. And the court says, notwithstanding this, it must be said that the comparison between undertakings at the level of gross margin presents two types of difficulties. The first is the method requires homogeneity of accounting data. It matters whether you put, if you look at gross profit, it matters whether you put costs above or below gross profit margin, right? If you put it on OPEX, you're not going to hit the gross profit. And you need to know whether your comparables do the same. And there's discussion in the case showing that DELSEY Spain maybe had different accounting policies from the norm. So the court doesn't like this, and the court then also says it can be only concluded at a certain point, even if the group itself questioned the comparability of its operations carried out in Greece and Portugal, and in general, the entire transfer pricing policy followed until then. Coinciding with all this, from 2012, DELSEY Spain will begin to declare for the first time in many years a modest positive profit margin, right? And for 11 through 14, the taxpayer have used the resale price method. And again, this is very suspicious that you throw out your CUP comparables when you start making, when you start using the resale price method. And the court says, as a result, the complainant proposes for 2011 and onwards a set of comparables that in 2011 offers a range varies from 15% in the first quartile to 38% in the third quartile, which is 23 points wide. And it's clearly excessive, as two companies at the respective extremes of this range have very little in common. In such a situation, it makes more sense to make the comparison at the net margin level. And I really like the lower court's thinking in this. They do a proper TP analysis of what is going on. So the High Court follows the low court decision, and it says it's therefore necessary to point out that the appellant has sought to rely as the only evidence on the documentation submitted in administrative proceedings, reports from Crowe Howarth on transfer prices for 2009 and 10. And that was the only report that they had. But there was a problem. These are reports which, as is the case in ECLI and another Spanish tax case, I assume, have no date of issue and no signature. It is therefore impossible to know when they were issued, who issued them, and what their qualifications are. So the court doesn't really like these reports. It doesn't pay much attention to them. And part of it is that because DELSEY Spain itself did not use the report in any way as expert witness or expert documentation or anything like that, other than submitting it to the Spanish tax inspector. And there were other issues dealt with in this case, more Spain particular, whether Spanish national law allowed for some of the adjustments that the tax authorities made. For instance, because the company made losses year after year after year, it came into cash flow problems, it had to borrow money, the money costed interest, and the tax authorities said you can't get the deduction for the interest because if you made profits, you never would have had to make the loans. Issues like that. I will leave that because I was more curious about the LRD and the loss-making situation. If any of you are aware of cases that actually clearly say that LRDs can or cannot make losses during either the financial crisis of 2008 or probably in the future, the COVID period, I'd love to know about it. For now, this court concludes this court can only endorse the considerations and conclusions reached at the time by such highly specialized body as a TIAC, which makes me think the lower court must be a tax or maybe even a transfer pricing court only, to which should be added the high degree of reliability that can be associated with the painstaking and hard work carried out in this case by the officials of the tax inspectorate. Thus, the claim cannot succeed, especially as the plaintiff has not provided factual and extra-legal assumptions of her argument. And with that, the taxpayer lost the case. I look forward to discussing another case with you next week. Bye for now.